What's up, ladies and gents? It's Kenya here. Go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. This is part 2 of watching Veritasium's This Particle Moves Faster Than Light. Let's see what they're talking about.
In the opposite direction, so that they perfectly cancel out. But the electron spin could have been this instead, or this. All of these possibilities are valid, so the rules of quantum mechanics say that the electron does all of these possible things at once until it's measured. It's not just that we don't know what the spin is, the electron really is doing everything. The only restriction is whatever the electron is doing, the positron must do the exact opposite. This also means that when the electron is measured and its state is determined, so is the positrons. This is what we mean by entanglement. The two particles' states depend on each other. But how do we measure the particles and force them to do one thing? Well, for that, we use the Stern-Gerlach machine. It's essentially a strangely shaped magnet, and it's how we measure spin. The orientation of the magnets determines what axis you're measuring the spin in. For example,
Okay, so they are talking about entanglement, which is what I said. Which what I was thinking. So many weird aspects of that. It's like, okay, well, as soon as I measure it. So I think the important distinction is that, and this is just how I think about it. So what is quantum information really, really telling you? And why is it only relevant on, like atomic scales? I mean, it's not irrelevant on atomic scales and below, but I mean on higher than atomic scales. But um, again, I think that um, actually I kind of have two ideas on it. Either you're looking at a six-dimensional version of a fourth-dimensional thing, or you're looking at a fourth-dimensional picture of a 1 to 3 dimensional thing, or a fourth-dimensional thing. Um, Either way, I think it's important to realize how much of this is math, and very hard to experiment on in a straightforward way, but they do have experiments about it, so let's learn.
if the machine is like this, and we shoot in a particle with spin in the positive z direction, it will certainly go to this spot we'll call plus. If instead a particle has negative z spin, it will certainly go down to minus. So this Stern-Gerlach machine measures spin in the z-axis. So what happens when we put in one of our entangled particles? When the electron goes into this machine, it either goes to plus or to minus, with 50-50 probability. Let's say our electron goes to plus. Well, this means it went from being in an indeterminate state to positive z spin. But what about the positron? Well, the only way to conserve spin is if it's now in the negative z spin state. When it's measured, there is a 100% chance it's minus. It has to be that way to conserve spin. But the authors of the paper realized there's...
So I kind of described this in part 1 a little bit, just thinking about, like, if I tell you, I went to McDonald's in February, right? At that point, the me going to McDonald's is in like a superposition. Is it really in a superposition? No, because I did go to McDonald's on a particular day. I just haven't told you yet. But until I tell you, okay, no, I went to McDonald's on February 3rd, you're saying, okay, now the values of all the other days are now 0 because I only went on February 3rd. Sort of. I mean, 0. But I think maybe my illustration is missing something, but I think maybe we'll learn about that.
something very odd about this result.
To see what's wrong with this, let's imagine that the electron and the positron carry these envelopes with them. These envelopes represent the state of the two particles. Until they're measured, both of the particles are in a superposition of being plus and minus at the same time. So both options are in the envelope. But now let's move the positron to someone who's far, far away. In this analogy, opening the envelope is like measuring the spin of the electron, but that causes the wave function of the electron to collapse to just one possibility. In this case, it's plus. But what happens to the other envelope far away? Well, it needs to instantly collapse to minus, because otherwise, when the experimenter opens their envelope, they have a chance of seeing plus.
So one thing I also kind of think about this is the problem is sort of um, there's like quantum decoherence, right? And part of the problem with entanglement, is like, okay, how well is this going to work across distances? Um, because, why would that electron not become entangled, let's say, or the positron? It could change. It could become entangled with a different particle somehow. Um, anyway, let's keep going. Let's keep going with I almost think this is just like a fun idea because it's fun to think about, not so much anything else.
Which would violate the conservation of spin. But if it needs to collapse instantly when the electron is measured, then how does it know what to collapse to? It must receive intel from the faraway electron, but that message has to travel much faster.
I mean, does it need to receive information? I think if you view its six-dimensional superposition as it is really in a superposition, I just don't know why you would actually do that. I think quantum mechanics is great at being able to do math on the quantum scale, right? Part of my hypothesis is that different scales, because they require different energies of action or engagement or whatever, one, they're artificial. Two, though, they go into different dimensions, right? So the quantum scale, the quantum observation of a particle, looking at a part of it, doesn't necessarily explain its fourth dimensional reality, which might, for us, just be something that is difficult to think about linearly. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't also have a fourth dimensional reality with it, or a third dimensional reality with it.
Faster than the speed of light to get to the positron in time. And so with this argument, Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen had shown that the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics really is non-local. Einstein had already shown this in his conference talk, but this argument was even more decisive.
It does seem like it's the same thing, but now it's ramped up and you've got these two separate particles to do those two separate measurements, and one measurement influencing the other measurement definitely feels wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I think he really realized that it's measurements that are the problem in quantum mechanics.
The wave function of a single particle, or of this pair of particles, can end up spread over vast distances. That isn't itself an issue. But when the wave function collapses, the information about that collapse needs to spread everywhere the wave function is. That's what makes quantum mechanics non-local.
The EPR paper didn't just point out this non-locality issue. They proved that there is only one local alternative theory for explaining this experiment. In this local story, instead of the electron choosing whether to be plus or minus when it's measured, it actually makes that choice when it's still in contact with the positron. There's some random way that this plus and minus gets put into these two envelopes. Which is why the plus and minus are called hidden variables. And because this alternative theory assigns these hidden variables in a local way while they're still in contact with each other, rather than over a big distance, we call this a local hidden variable theory.
Which I think, again, would be the fourth dimensional perspective of these, because, like, okay, you can't see it since it's in six dimensions. Though, just my thought, again, that's what I'm thinking.
Now, this local hidden variable theory is going to be able to explain this experiment really simply. Let's pass away the positron. And now, when the electron is measured as a plus, it doesn't have to rush to tell the positron. The positron already knows. There is no action at a distance. This local hidden variable story is
Although I will say that I also do think that um, the sixth dimension moves faster than light because light is only the speed limit for three-dimensional things. I think so. In my hypothesis, there's more than three dimensions, and that's why it's very easy for things to move four-dimensionally. I think data has no problem moving fourth-dimensionally in the same way that we can easily hold a concept, a flawless concept, or as I don't know who it was, Plato, or I don't know, one of them who believed in perfect forms. Let's say I know about the way something looks. I can hold that in my head for 2 weeks. Why? Even if the thing disintegrates, because the data is detached from the body. The data is a set of fourth-dimensional coordinates that can't three-dimensional structure can be mapped to, in my hypothesis. And so much more, quantum effects can easily traverse time, and in fact, control time to a certain degree, and or at least are the linear concept of time, the distance of time to a degree, and then entanglement even more. If I'm correct, and entanglement is related to the ninth dimension, has no problem. Has no problem quite energetically moving through time. Let's see if we can get more into that.
So much more sensible than the quantum one.
So we're forced to accept one of two explanations for this experiment. Either non-locality, like the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, or a local hidden variable theory. Given that non-local action at a distance contradicts relativity, Einstein thought this was definitive proof that the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics is wrong, and therefore there must be some local hidden variable theory that will replace it. Einstein showed us that quantum mechanics allows influences that seem to travel faster than light. But with today's video sponsor, you can have your own spooky action at a distance with one-click Nord router.
With full theory of quantum mechanics. So of course,
Bell's theorem.
the EPR paper certainly got a lot of attention. Without asking Einstein, Podolsky leaked the paper to the press, and the story ended up in the New York Times.
Prodigious harvest of the day's intelligence is reached.
Einstein was the most famous scientist in the world, and he was going after the strange but successful theory of quantum mechanics, so of course the press loved it. But what did scientists think of the argument itself?
So the reality.
Can you imagine living in this time, though, where scientists were beefing through the biggest media platforms?
The reaction of the physics community was at first mixed. There were some people, sort of old allies.
It's just interesting to think about that, and why science progresses and moves, at so many different paces, at different times. And I think to a degree we still do have that. Though I think one way in which they've gotten far more intelligent in recent times is understanding not to put scientists who don't agree with each other in the same room. I was watching one thing the other day, and because the debates are just so interesting, because so many scientists just have so many concepts that are built on their perceptions and the areas in which they're invested in, because philosophical differences really do sort of become the differences in science, except for those most closely related to being a practitioner or in some type of application style, experimental engineering type things, because that's when it becomes, it's like, okay, well, I need the ruler that measures what I'm working on, not the ruler that is hypothetically the best ruler in the world. Anyway, let's continue.
Of Einstein's who were very happy with it. Schrödinger being sort of at the top of that list. And in fact, in an attempt to clear up some of the misunderstandings that people were having about the EPR paper, Schrödinger publishes the thought experiment known as Schrödinger's cat, sort of back up Einstein and show the kind of problem that he and Einstein had with quantum physics. Bohr, meanwhile, was like, oh my God, what the hell is this? He must be wrong. How do we show that he's wrong? Then Bohr ultimately, in his sort of painful and complicated style, ends up coming up with a response to the EPR paper. This response is sort of famously obscure and difficult to understand, and I've read it in detail, and I will tell you, Bohr's reply is either nonsensical or makes some actual mistakes.
There's a very well-turned sentence which I believe Bohr took a great deal of trouble in formulating, and whose meaning is just absolutely obscure to me.
Bohr said in his reply to EPR, in his multiple replies to EPR, that there is no question of anything non-local going on. So the ultimate reaction of the physics community, at least in the immediate years and decades following the publication of EPR and Bohr's reply in 1935, was to think that Bohr had settled it with his reply, even though people didn't really understand what Bohr had said.
2 decades later, Einstein died, still questioning quantum mechanics, but the majority of the physics community had moved on without him. Bohr, however, never forgot about the EPR paper. In 1962, 7 years after Einstein's death, Bohr gave an interview about Einstein, and he lamented that Einstein wasted decades on fruitless thought experiments because he simply could not accept quantum mechanics. It was terrible that Einstein fell in that trap to work with Podolsky, Bohr said. Rosen is worse from my point of view. Rosen even today believes the EPR thought experiment. Podolsky has given it up, as far as I know. The whole idea is absolutely nothing when one really gets into it. You may think that I say it too strongly, but it is true. There's absolutely no problem in it. The next day, Bohr took a nap after lunch and never woke up. And so, after
Random.
many decades, the Einstein-Bohr debate was over.
Bohr's authority was part of the reason the EPR paper didn't get the attention it deserved.
But there was another reason physicists ignored it. In the EPR experiment, both theories, Copenhagen quantum mechanics and Einstein's local hidden variable alternative, make exactly the same prediction. You get the same results either way. Debating two different interpretations of the same experimental result seemed like armchair philosophy, not real physics. The Copenhagen interpretation makes good predictions, so why not just teach that and move on?
It just seems like, shut up and calculate, I think is the message that kind of gets pushed.
The general attitude was, this is done. Who cares? None of this matters. It's all settled. Einstein and Bohr had a big debate about it, and Bohr won. Do you think you're smarter than Niels Bohr? Do you think you're smarter than Albert Einstein?
It seemed like it would be impossible to resolve this debate until another physicist turned his attention to it.
John Bell was an undergraduate student shortly after World War II, in this new era of physics, and so, of course, he was taught the Copenhagen interpretation.
John Bell's doubts about quantum mechanics, by his own recollection, showed up basically the minute he learned it. In his first quantum mechanics class, he was, getting pretty upset with the instructors and saying, you're being too vague. What the heck do you mean about measurement?
Bell was never fully satisfied by the answers he got about the foundations of quantum mechanics, but when he was doing his PhD, he was encouraged to study something a little bit more respectable, and so he studied nuclear physics and went on to have a very accomplished career at CERN. But after 8 years of working in particle physics, in 1963 he took an academic sabbatical, and finally he had time to focus on his doubts about quantum mechanics. He said, "I always knew that it was waiting for me." He began by re-examining the old debates and the papers that most physicists had long since dismissed as philosophical distractions, including the EPR paper. After this research, he said, I
Yes,
felt
I
that
think I should
Einstein's
call
intellectual
this
superiority
part 2,
over Bohr
and
in
we'll
this
get started
instance
in part
was
3 in just a
enormous,
second.
a vast gulf